Because Gary gave you that rose based on lies. You lied for that rose. You don't deserve it. What's up, y'all? It's your girl Roxy with Roxy Says, and we're gonna talk about it. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you are returning, welcome back. So today we are reviewing the Golden Bachelor episodes 1 through 5. Okay, so we're gonna get all caught up so that we're ready for episode 6 because that comes out in like 2 days. Okay, for starters, I want to thank everyone who participated in my poll because let me just say this. Originally, I was gonna do Married at First Sight Denver. Baby, I could not even make it through the first episode. Then when I did my poll, I saw that the majority of y'all aren't even watching Married at First Sight. Most of you preferred The Bachelor. So I said, thank you very much because I don't even like the show and y'all aren't even watching it. Perfect. Let's do The Golden Bachelor. And I love the show. Now I know the majority of you are here from Love is Blind. And I always said that I felt like the lowest age for contestants on Love is Blind should be 29 and up. So I love the concept of the Golden Bachelor because these people are way past 29. So I was really excited to see how these people get into it. Not to mention, I've never seen any season of The Bachelor ever. All right, y'all, so let's get right into this video. But before we do, please don't forget to hit like, comment, and subscribe. You already know I appreciate all the support. So let me start off by saying this. This show really warms my heart. I love seeing these older people still putting themselves out there, still believing in love, even though a lot of them have dealt with tragedy and heartbreak. I just love to see that they haven't given up. And this show so far has been so wholesome with just the right amount of mess, just the right amount, not too much. And coming off of season 5, Love is Blind, which was full of drama on and off the show, this was very refreshing. All right, so let's meet our bachelor. His name is Gary Turner. He's 71 years old and he is a widower. He is excited to find the second love of his life. Gary was married to his wife for 43 years. They were high school sweethearts. They built a beautiful life together, and when they both retired, they bought their dream home in 2017. Unfortunately, shortly after, Gary's wife Toni became very ill, and sadly, within a couple of weeks, Toni passed away. She had a bacterial infection in her kidneys, and it spread to her liver. So it's been 6 years since Toni passed, and Gary says, of course, no one can replace the love that I have for her, but he's still yearning to have that love in his life again. And Gary has the full support of his children and his grandchildren. Off the bat, Gary's a handsome guy. He's smooth. He has a nice smile, okay? And he doesn't disappoint throughout the season. Gary is a gentleman. I really like Gary, okay? So now it's time to meet the ladies, and these ladies did not come to play. This is the scene that got me invested in the show. So it's about 20 women. So first we meet Edith. Edith is 60 years old. She's the first one out the limo. And I'm letting y'all know now, we don't see Edith much throughout the show, okay? She gets cut very early, but they made sure to show Edith because Edith came out that limo looking like everything. I was looking at Edith. I was like, well, damn, Edith. Edith did not come to play, okay? But my first impression of her was that she was really sweet. So next we meet Ellen. Ellen is 71 years old and she is a firecracker. I immediately got the vibe that she's from New York or New Jersey. She just gave me that with her accent, period, okay? Her and her bestie, who when she came to the show was battling cancer, really bonded off of The Bachelor. So that's one of the main reasons why she is here. Next we meet Sandra. She's from Atlanta. She's 75 years old. She does this little funny Zen thing with Gary that had me looking at my TV like, now Sandra, what are you doing? I already knew Sandra was going to be a little fun character. Child, next we have Leslie. Leslie is 64. I think she's the youngest woman on the show. Leslie is a choreographer slash dancer, and she also lets us know that she used to date Prince, and he wrote the song Sexy Dancer about her. Okay, Leslie. Leslie also lets us know that she's been married twice. Both marriages lasted for 7 years each. Next we meet Teresa. Teresa is 70 years old. She shows Gary her birthday suit because today just happens to be her birthday. That was really cute. I'm like, okay, Teresa, she ain't wasting no time. Next we meet April. April is 65 years old. She grew up on a chicken farm and she made sure to let Gary know that her eggs were still fresh. Okay, sis, let him know. Then we meet Faith, who rolled up on a motorcycle. I was like, okay, that's different. And then we meet a woman named Chippy. She's 84 years old. We find out that she is Jimmy Kimmel's aunt. Chippy was just here for a good time, not a long time. But I will say that all of the ladies made a great first impression. Gary is super adorable and he looks thoroughly impressed by all of the ladies. So after the initial introduction, all of the ladies are in the mansion. They're sizing each other up. Gary comes in to do a toast, and baby, the toast is barely over before April is like, hey, Gary, let me pull you aside. I'm like, is April in Aries? Okay, because she's giving confidence. She's giving flirt. I'm in Aries. So that tracks. So after April's convo, we see Gary. He has a couple of conversations with some of the other ladies. It's a lot of laughing, a lot of smiling. We see on his date with Faith, the one who pulled up on the motorcycle, okay, she pops out her guitar. She's singing to Gary, and Gary looked like he was in love while Faith was singing to him, okay? So next we see Jimmy. He brings out that first impression rose. So this rose is given to the woman who's made the best first impression on Gary for the first night, right? So of course, everyone wants to get this first impression rose. It's a big deal. We see Gary go on a date with Teresa. Remember, it's her 70th birthday. So Gary brings her this cupcake and he starts putting the mat down, okay? He says, look here, sweet thing.
So if I were to just take a bite of that and have a whole bunch of icing, you know, like this, would you help clean it up?
Yes, I would.
Oh, look.
It looks so good.
Okay, Gary with the Riz. Oh yeah, Big Daddy, you can help me take it off. Child, I can't. So they kissed, and it wasn't a peck either, okay? It was very deep, very intimate. But I couldn't stop smiling, and I was like, I hope that he gives Teresa that rose, because how you gonna tongue her down and then give the rose to someone else? But he actually does give the rose to someone else. He ends up giving that first impression rose to Faith. Remember the motorcycle driving, guitar playing, singing lady? Yeah, she gets the first impression rose. And he says it's because Faith made him feel really special. Now, Faith was on cloud nine after this. She thought she had it in the bag, but we're gonna see in the next couple of episodes, Faith is not gonna be too happy. So now it's time for the first rose ceremony, and of course, anyone who does not receive a rose is going home. And by this time, we have found our villain of the season. What's her name, class? Say it with me. Kathy. Yes, okay? It's only the first night, and Kathy is already giving big hater vibes, and it's only gonna get worse. But I will say I was very nervous during this first rose ceremony because this is the first type of show like this where I'm genuinely rooting for everybody, okay? This isn't Love is Blind where you got some 20-something, 30-something-year-olds, and they have more time to like mess up, get into another relationship. No, these people are 60, 70, we even have an 80-year-old, right? And for a lot of these ladies, as they say, this feels like their last chance at love. So to me, the eliminations on this show, they hold so much weight in comparison to like other dating shows. For me, I feel. So we see that Susan gets the last rose, right? And the other ladies look so heartbroken. And you can also see that it deeply affects Gary. He gets emotional, he's tearing up. And I'm not gonna lie, I was tearing up too. But it does show that Gary is taking these decisions very seriously. And the last thing that he wants to do is hurt any of these ladies. Child, then we see that Chippy, Jimmy Kimmel's aunt, she slept through the rose ceremony. I told y'all Chippy is here for a good time, not a long time. She got some champagne and she took a nap, okay?
You doing okay?
Did I get a rose?
No, you slept through the rose ceremony.
But unfortunately, at the end of this episode, we learned that Ellen's bestie, Roberta, actually passed from cancer. So definitely RIP to her. All right, y'all. So now we're on week 2 and we're starting off with 16 women. Okay, so the ladies are moving into the mansion. There's 4 women to a room. I have a question. Why do y'all have these grown women in bunk beds? Is this the norm for The Bachelor? Now, this is not the first reality show that I've seen where they put people in bunk beds, but this is the Golden Bachelor, okay? These ladies should not be climbing up no ladder to go to sleep, okay? That's an accident waiting to happen. Get these ladies some grown women beds, okay? My grandma would be cursing y'all out. Anywho, we see Teresa. She gets the very first one-on-one date with Gary. She's super excited. She's super nervous. And at this point, Teresa was definitely my fave. She seemed really sweet, really genuine, right? So Gary picks Teresa up for the date. The wind is blowing in her hair. The headlights aren't working. It's his first time driving on the freeway. It's a whole mess. But Teresa puts her hand on Gary's shoulder and she tells him he's doing an amazing job. And her doing that meant the world to him, okay? So they pull up at a diner. And we also learned that Teresa was married to her ex-husband for 40 plus years. And he was also her high school sweetheart, right? So her and Gary have that same thing in common. The date goes very well. They bond, they kiss. It ends with a flash mob, people dancing and singing Don't Stop Believing. Just adorable. Just adorable. And Gary gives her a rose, so she is safe from elimination. So the next day, everyone goes on a group date. At this point, we have 12 women left, okay? And what they're doing is a romance cover shoot with different themes from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then there's a wedding dress theme as well. So everyone changes into their outfits and they come out to take pics. We got the hater Kathy saying that Gary looks like his dog. I was like, girl. Then we see Edith, and she's mad because she claims that Natasha took her outfit. If that's the outfit that you wanted, you should have grabbed it first. Natasha had it first. How she took your outfit? And I really like Natasha because Natasha is from New York like myself. She reminds me of my high school dance teachers. She reminds me of myself, okay? Like, don't come for Natasha. She ain't take nothing from you, girl. Stop. So during this scene, we see Nancy gets very emotional at her photo shoot with Gary because she's wearing a wedding dress. And the last time that she had on a wedding dress was when she married her husband, which was many years ago, and he has now passed. So this photo shoot brought on a lot of emotions for her. And Gary senses that, so he pulls her aside and they have a conversation about it. And Gary says he can totally understand how she feels because during Christmas time, his wife used to make cinnamon balls. And one time he walked into a bakery, he smelled cinnamon, and it reminded him of his wife, and he was just immediately overcome with emotion. So we see Gary spend some intimate time with a lot of the other ladies. We see that one of the ladies has 2 hearing aids, just like Gary, so they bond over that. But at the end of this group date, we see Gary giving that rose to Nancy. So now we're on to the next day, and today is Gary's birthday, okay? The ladies surprised him with balloons, they hopping out of cake, just doing everything to make him feel special. But tonight is also the rose ceremony, so you know these ladies are gonna be laying it on thick because no one wants to go home. So we see Faith, and she's feeling down because she says even though she received the first impression rose on the first night, she feels like since then she hasn't gotten much attention from Gary. And I'm like, yeah, girl, he has to make his rounds amongst all the ladies. He can't spend all his time with just you, like, hello. And here's where I start not liking Faith too much, okay? So she tells Gary that she's starting to feel inadequate in comparison to the other girls because the other ladies wear jewelry and they're fancy, and she drinks out of a water hose and she just wears flip-flops. And I'm like, girl, it's giving pick me. And this is not the only time that Faith is gonna do this. We're gonna see Faith speaking to Gary, and when she's speaking to him, she's like, oh, those other girls do that. I don't do that. I do this. It's like, girl, just be confident in who you are. When you have one-on-ones with Gary, you should be speaking about how you feel about Gary. You should be speaking about your future together. And you shouldn't be comparing yourself to the other girls in order to make yourself look better in Gary's eyes. He's either gonna like you for who you are or he's not. And Gary is an intelligent man, okay? He doesn't need you to compare things for him. He's gonna pick who he wants to pick at the end of the day, despite what you say. Gary might like a fancy girl. You don't know that. So all you can do is be yourself. So child, it's rose ceremony night, and Kathy gets the last rose. And I'm like, oh, Lord, not this lady. But my girl Natasha was one of the ladies who got sent home. And I wasn't surprised because even though I love Natasha, I definitely didn't see a connection between her and Gary. Gary kept giving Natasha those pat on the back hugs, those church hugs, okay? But Natasha made sure to leave y'all with some words of wisdom about these rose ceremonies.
Do the rose ceremony in chairs. People in here 60, 70, and above. Do the rose ceremony in the chairs. Chair rose ceremony.
Woo! I love Natasha. Okay, so now we start week 3 with 12 women. So the stakes are even higher. And this is the episode where I was really looking at Kathy like, lady, are you okay? So we see Kathy, she's sitting with her little friends or whatever, and she's talking about Teresa. So we see 4 of the ladies, they've created this little clique. It's called Askin, A-S-K-N. We got April, Susan, Kathy, and Nancy, okay? Askin. So they notice that Gary has formed a really strong bond with Teresa. And Kathy is jealous of that. And she's also jealous at the fact that Teresa's clothes are so tiny and she's the only one who's had a one-on-one. Another thing that I love about this show is that it shows that insecurity and jealousy has no age limit because Kathy is doing the most. And yes, we all know that this show is edited and produced. We just going by what we see on the screen, okay? So the date for today is a talent show, and the winner of the talent show gets a super romantic date with Gary. So we see Sandra, she tells a funny, raunchy joke. Faith and April sing. Kathy does some push-ups, which was pretty impressive. I don't like the lady, but that's pretty impressive. And then we see Leslie, okay, Prince's alleged ex. She does a sexy little dance for Gary. And a lot of the ladies looked really salty about it. They were not happy that Leslie was backing that thing up on Gary, okay? But who was the saltiest about it? Kathy, yeah. She was not happy. And next we see Joan, okay? Joan was very nervous about the talent show. She felt like she didn't really have a talent, so she decided to write a poem. And it was such a cute and heartfelt poem. Everyone loved it. I loved it too. And I just knew that she was getting that one-on-one date with Gary, and she did. So on their date, they both discussed the loss of their spouses and how that's affected them. And Joan also lets Gary know that her daughter just gave birth 15 days ago, and it was a pretty rough delivery. But she says that she came here because because she wanted to finally do something for herself. This date goes extremely well, and Gary ends up giving Joan a rose. And at this point, I was like, oh, I really like Gary and Joan together. Unfortunately, the very next day we see Joan. She's getting a phone call from her daughter about the complications of her delivery. She's still not feeling well, and Joan decides to go home to be with her daughter. And I totally get it. My mama would do the same. So Joan goes to tell the ladies, and they're all very supportive and emotional because they are sad to see her leave, and they know that it's a very tough decision that Joan had to make. Even Kathy the hater was crying. So now it's time for Joan to break the news to Gary, and he tells her that he definitely understands, but he's also very disappointed in the decision because he felt a strong connection with her. He said that he woke up this morning on cloud 9. He was dancing. He was in great spirits, all because of the amazing date that they had the day before. But he reluctantly says his goodbyes, and Joan is going home, okay? But this car scene with Joan really had me in my feelings because Joan says that this experience with Gary has helped to heal her heart a little bit. And she says it's because the older you get, you become more invisible and less significant.
People don't see you anymore.
That really broke my heart to hear her say that. And that's why this show is so different, because the feelings are just heavier. The stakes are higher. But I genuinely hope that all of these ladies, even the hater, finds the love that they're looking for. And even though they're going to go home and they're not ending up with Gary, that they're not discouraged by this experience and that they don't give up on love, you know? So in the next scene, we see the fashion designer, Michael Costello. He comes in and he lets the ladies know that tonight Ellen will be having the one-on-one date with Gary. And of course, Ellen is super excited. However, Teresa and Faith are clearly bothered by this, okay? So Gary has planned a beautiful date of pampering for Ellen. She gets to pick out from many of Michael Costello's dresses. And Gary's goal for this date is to see if him and Ellen have a romantic connection. So the date is great. They have amazing conversation. Gary also gifts her with earrings. He takes her up in a hot air balloon, gives her a rose, and a kiss, okay? Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Teresa is venting to Kathy. And I'm like, girl,
no, why are you talking to this lady?
I know on these competition dating shows, a lot of people like to share. Sometimes it's good because y'all can trade notes and see who's lying and who's not. But sometimes you got to feel out the situation, feel out who you're speaking to, and know when to shut up, okay? But after the conversation that Teresa has with Kathy, Kathy is upset. Kathy feels like Teresa thinks that she has this whole competition in the bag, and Kathy doesn't like that. It's almost like Kathy's like, how dare you be confident in your position in this house? So we later see when all of the ladies are together and they're gushing about Gary, April makes a comment and she said that the ladies in the house need to be more discreet and keep their mouth shut when it comes to their connection with Gary.
Girl.
And in my opinion, April was doing too much. But when Teresa hears the comment, she's like, is she talking about me? And remember, April is part of that asking group, you know, with her and Kathy and whoever else. So clearly at this point, they're both hating on Teresa. Teresa wants to get to the bottom of it. So she pulls up on April and she's like,
what's up? Were you talking about me?
And April doesn't stand on her beef, which is why I'm like, oh, maybe she's not in Aries. Because first of all, I wouldn't have even thrown Teresa no subs. I would have been like, hey, Teresa, you need to shut up. But April doesn't stand on it when Teresa presses her. April is like, well, I think you should discuss that with Kathy. And Teresa's like, so are you speaking on Kathy's behalf? And April is like, yeah, I'm speaking on her behalf. I'm like, girl, grow up. April tells Teresa that Kathy is heartbroken. Really? What is she heartbroken over? She doesn't even have a strong connection with Gary that we've been able to see. So what? Why is she heartbroken? Don't say heartbroken when the actual sentiment is jealousy. Like, be real. After this conversation, Teresa says that she's confused. She always thought that her and Kathy had a great relationship. I'm like, girl, where? But Teresa is very bothered that Kathy feels this way. Next, we see Kathy having a conversation with Gary. And this scene pissed me off, okay? So Kathy tells Gary, that she's had a rough day and that there's been a lot of meanness towards her and that people just haven't been nice to her. And Gary's like, oh my God, really? What's going on? Gary is very concerned and he asks her, is there anyone in particular in the house that I should be watching out for? And Kathy doesn't give a name, but she does put it in Gary's head that there's a woman in the house who's just going around being mean and nasty to people. And that is not the case. Kathy is a damn liar. She's dangerous as hell. And because Kathy lied to Gary about feeling so bad and people being so mean to her, Gary gave her a rose. But we're going to call that a pity rose, okay? Because Gary gave you that rose based on lies. You lied for that rose. You don't deserve it. So after that, Teresa pulls Kathy and her pity rose aside to have a conversation about what she just discussed with April. So this lady actually says that Teresa has made her feel dismissed and like, we're gonna be together, you might as well go home right now. And Teresa starts apologizing to Kathy. And I'm like, girl, what are you apologizing for? Because I would be like, now how the hell did I make you feel like that? Did I say that? I never said that. So I'm not about to apologize to you for the voices that you're hearing in your head. That don't got nothing to do with me, okay? It's obvious that Kathy is just insecure about Teresa's connection with Gary because she hasn't made that connection. And that's okay, but don't try to flip it as if Teresa has been boastful and showing off because she really hasn't. But baby, Teresa leaves there in tears. And she's like, that's not my intentions. That's not what I meant. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to make her feel like that. Teresa, you didn't make her feel like nothing. Stop apologizing, okay? And even Faith has to tell Teresa, like, girl, you weren't boasting. I've been in the same rooms. I've heard you speak about it. You didn't say any of those things, nor did you come off as boastful. So what is Kathy talking about? And I'm just looking at this like, Teresa, baby, you are too grown to let Kathy convince you that you said things that you know you did not say. But on the same end, I felt bad for Teresa because Kathy is literally gaslighting her. And to me, it was low-key giving bully. I feel like Kathy saw Teresa as an easy target, and she did the most in that conversation to make Teresa feel bad. She had the right one with Teresa because someone else, like my grandma, would have had Kathy leaving there in tears, okay? So Gary comes into the room because he hears Teresa crying and he wants to know what's going on. So Teresa is telling Gary about the conversation that she just had with Kathy. So now Gary is putting it together like, oh, Teresa is who Kathy was speaking about when we were having our little one-on-one conversation. And now Gary is disturbed because he believes what Kathy said about Teresa. And that bothers him because his initial impression of Teresa has totally changed based on Kathy's lies. So now it's time for the rose ceremony. And baby, Teresa got the last rose. And here is where I started to get pissed off with Teresa. Because after all of that with Kathy, Teresa is still saying that she wants to be friends with Kathy. Girl, why? Why? You're not here to make friends. You're here for Gary, okay? You don't have to be besties with everyone in this house. And to make matters even worse, when the elimination is over, Teresa tells Kathy that when Gary heard her crying, he came upstairs in the bedroom to comfort her. Baby, Kathy was pissed. And in that moment, I was like, Teresa, shut up. And this was the very first time that I agreed with Kathy because Kathy said, I don't know if this girl really doesn't understand what she's doing or if she's doing this shit on purpose. I'm not sure. And let me say this, Teresa is a grown woman. She doesn't have to obey Kathy's orders about not speaking about Gary. Teresa can say what she wants to say. Kathy, your kids are at home. You don't give orders to anybody here. However, you were just bawling your eyes out because you didn't want to make anyone feel bad, especially Kathy, about things that you've done with Gary. So why in the very next scene would you turn around and do it again? So it begs the question, do you really feel bad? Are you just oblivious or are you doing it on purpose? All right, y'all. So it's week 4 and now we see Trista. She was the first bachelorette 20 years ago and she's greeting the ladies and telling them about her experience. And she's encouraging the ladies and she's letting them know that this experience really works. And Teresa's like, oh my God, you're so right. I just have to tell you about my connection with Gary. I got the first one-on-one date and this is how it went. And I'm just like, I'm not sure if Teresa is just a super friendly oversharer or if she's doing it on purpose. So we see Leslie get picked for a solo date with Gary and the other ladies are going on a group date. So for this group date, they are going to play pickleball and this is one of Gary's favorite things to do. We see Faith, remember the motorcycle, guitar playing, singing lady? And she's still sad about not getting another date with Gary since she got her first impression rose on the first night. So anyway, we see them go off to their pickleball game. Baby, why did April fake fall in order to get more attention from Gary? When I tell you this scene had me cracking up because April was like, ain't nothing wrong with me. I'm fine, okay? But I'm like, do what you gotta do, April, because clearly Gary is out here giving out pity roses. So if you gotta fake a fall for your little pity rose, go ahead and do it, okay? So the ladies split off into teams for this pickleball tournament and the winning team gets to be featured in a pickleball magazine with Gary. In all honesty, I was smiling the entire time. I loved watching the ladies play. They had on their cute little matching outfits, just adorable. But when I tell you Sandra was playing like this was an Olympic game. She was doing her thing, okay? But in the end, it was Ellen and Kathy who won, and they both got a little kiss from Gary. But during this game, Gary found out some very important information. So it was revealed to Gary that today was actually Sandra's daughter's wedding day, and she was missing it to be here with him. So Gary takes her aside to have a conversation and discuss this because he feels like that's a very important day, and that's something that Sandra should be at. But Sandra tells Gary that her and her daughter spoke about it extensively, and her daughter said, "Look, Mom, I already got my man. I want you to get yours." And her daughter gave her full blessing. So Gary says, let's FaceTime her. And it was really cute because they were trying to figure out FaceTime. But once they finally figured it out, they were able to speak to Sandra's daughter. And you can tell that she was genuinely happy for her mother. And she really wanted her mom to be there with Gary. Child, next we see Teresa pull Kathy aside. And at this point, I'm like, Teresa, leave this lady alone. Leave her alone. So Teresa wants to discuss the previous rose ceremony where she was telling Kathy that Gary came upstairs to the bedroom and Kathy told her, stop telling me these things, right? And Kathy's like, girl, have you never heard about don't kiss and tell? Just don't talk about it. And y'all know I don't see it for Kathy. But if Teresa goes up to Kathy after this conversation and volunteers more information about her and Gary and Kathy curses Teresa out, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind. I would understand. Because now I think you're doing it on purpose. So after that conversation, we see Gary spending one-on-one time with all of the ladies there. And when he's speaking of Faith, she does it again. She's like, oh, did you see all of the other ladies running to kiss you? I stayed back. I didn't run to kiss you like those other ladies did. Again, Faith, why is it every time we see you speaking to Gary, you're always comparing yourself to the other ladies? Why? That's probably why he hasn't picked you for another date since, because when you're together, all you're doing is comparing yourself to the other ladies. Child, next we see Teresa speaking to Gary, okay? And Teresa spills all the beans and she tells Gary that she just had a conversation with Kathy and Kathy told her to zip it. Shut your ass up, okay? And Gary doesn't like that. So after his conversation with Teresa, Gary pulls Kathy aside and he's like, what's going on with you and Teresa? And Kathy says, you know, she told me that you comforted her and this, that, and the third. And Gary is like, yeah, well, I comforted her the same way that I comforted everyone else. And Gary's tone is kind of like, girl, what's the problem? And Gary even reminds her about that pity rose that he gave her. So that conversation doesn't go too well for Kathy. So of course, after that conversation, she's pissed at Teresa. But anyway, after this date, we see Sandra get a rose and Gary gave Sandra the rose because he felt like she was missing a very big moment to be here with him. And that meant a lot to him. And I'm gonna tell you why Sandra's rose is not a pity rose, okay? Because Sandra didn't go to Gary and say, hey, Gary, I'm missing my daughter's wedding to be here. From what we can see, Sandra wasn't gonna tell Gary that she was missing her daughter's wedding. He had to get that information from someone else, as opposed to Kathy, who went to Gary with a bunch of lies and said, oh, people are not being nice to me. People are being mean to me.
Pity Rose, okay?
All right, so next we see Leslie and Gary on their solo date. And they go ATV riding. I love riding ATVs, okay? So I know they had a good time. And we see on this date, Gary keeps looking back and he's checking on Leslie, making sure that she's okay. And he says that he feels very protective of Leslie. Now tell me what you think, but I wonder if that has to do with age, because Leslie is the youngest woman there. So maybe he feels more protective of her as opposed to the other ladies who are closer to his age. I wonder. But Leslie does say that she feels very safe with Gary. So on their date, they get into a really deep conversation and Leslie lets Gary know that she's been single for 22 years. And you can see that during this conversation, they really connect and the date ends with Gary giving her a rose and they start making out in the pool, okay? So in the next scene, we see Gary back home. He's having a date with Susan. I really like Susan. I don't know if it's her smile or her haircut. I feel like she plays it cool. She doesn't get into the drama too much. She just be chilling. I like her. But Gary gives her a little gift and she gets really emotional and she hugs him and baby, they start making out. And who do we see peeking through the bushes, creeping and watching them making out? Kathy, okay? So then when Susan comes back into the living room, Kathy's like, let me see the gift. What's that? Let me see it. And Susan shows Kathy the gift. But you see how she acted when Susan, her homegirl, came in with the gift and was gushing about Gary, right? The energy was totally different than the energy that she gave Teresa. In the next scene, we see Ellen with Gary and she's telling Gary that she is falling in love with him. He doesn't say it back, but he's really sweet. They hug and they kiss and he lets her know that he has strong feelings for her as well. Now, like I said, this is my first time watching The Bachelor. I don't know if they are allowed to say I love you back. So let me know in the comments if that's a thing. Like, are they not allowed to definitively say like I love you or I'm falling in love with you until the very end of the season? Let me know. I'm not sure. So next we see Nancy and she pulls Gary aside for a conversation and she's honest and she says that although she's enjoying her time here, she definitely feels like Gary has developed stronger connections with some of the other ladies than he has with her. And Gary says, I'm not going to dispute that. And I liked this scene for 2 reasons, okay? One, because Nancy was able to recognize that and gracefully bow out and say, you know what, I'm not gonna waste any more of my time here. And she's not comparing herself to the other women. She's not begging Gary, like, what's wrong with me? What can I do differently? No, she's just like, okay, well, thank you. I enjoyed my time here and I'm about to go, okay? And 2, I appreciate that Gary was honest with her. He didn't keep her hanging on when he genuinely knew that he wasn't connecting with her like that. So we see Nancy leave, so now it's just ask. There's no more asking. And her homegirls are really sad and crying. But just because Nancy left doesn't mean that one of y'all still ain't going home, okay? So there's still gonna be a rose ceremony and someone else is still being sent home. And at this rose ceremony, Teresa gets the very last rose. And our homegirls, April and Kathy the hater and her pity rose, they get sent home. Now, can I be honest? Y'all know I don't see it for Kathy, but I was low-key sad to see her go because she brought a good amount of mess, okay? I was sad to see Kathy go, and I honestly expected her to leave the way New York did on Flavor of Love.
Whatever, I don't give a Do I look like I give because I don't.
But she didn't. She kept it classy, and at least she was honest enough to say that Gary did make stronger connections with the other ladies than he did with her. So now it's week 5, and there are only 6 ladies left, and this is the week that determines who will get chosen for the hometown visits. So the ladies are thinking that 4 of them will get hometown visits, but Jamie comes in and he's like, oh no, baby, it's not gonna be 4, it's only gonna be 3. We see Faith get chosen for a one-on-one date, and you know that she's super excited about that because she's been complaining about not getting a date and the necessary attention from Gary since receiving that rose on the first night. And I'm like, okay, Faith, you got a one-on-one date with Gary. You better not get on that date talking about the other ladies, okay? Use your time wisely. And although Faith is super excited, in Gary's confessional, he lets us know that the reason why he's actually taking Faith on this date is because out of all of the women, Faith is the biggest question mark for him, okay? She's the one who he's most unsure about. So this date is really cute, okay? Gary takes Faith on this helicopter ride, and the helicopter lands on a yacht. Period. Okay. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we see Leslie. She's crying because she didn't get picked for this super romantic date. And I'm like, Leslie, girl, you just went on a date with Gary. Like, you can't have all the dates. Come on now. So back on the yacht, Faith reveals to Gary that she had a pretty dysfunctional childhood, and growing up in that type of environment has definitely spilled over into her adult life and into her relationships. And she says that's why she loves Gary so much, because he represents safety and stability for her, and she's never been treated so well in her relationships. Gary thanks her for sharing that with him, and he loves getting to know her on a deeper level, and he gives her the very first hometown rose. Okay, so Faith is safe from elimination. So Faith comes back and the ladies see her rose, okay? And the ladies are like, tell me about the date. And Faith actually asks them, she's like, are y'all sure y'all want to know? Because the date went really well. Like, I had a great time. And they're like, yes, tell us everything. So she's gushing about Gary and she's letting them know how amazing and how romantic the date was. And you can see it on Ellen and Leslie's face. They are not happy. So now it's time for the group date, and Gary takes the ladies to Santa Monica Pier, and he wants this date to be about fun. So they do everything. They're playing the games, they're doing the bumper cars, okay? They're on the roller coasters, just a really great time. Then we see Teresa take Gary aside for a conversation. And Teresa says that she wants to put it all on the line with Gary. And I can understand it because there's only 2 roses left and the stakes are high, okay? But if you've been around here for any amount of time, you already know I don't like the begging. I don't like it. It's one thing to be upfront and tell someone how you feel about them, but this conversation was more so giving, oh, please pick me, please. Okay. So she tells Gary that she's falling in love with him. And then she also tells him that she feels like she can't live without him. And I was like, girl, you've been living all this time without him. Like, you'll be okay, okay? And Gary's conversation with Teresa, and we'll later see with Ellen, is very different from this conversation that he has with Leslie. So in this conversation with Leslie, Gary is telling her that he wakes up thinking about her. He had an amazing time on his date. He felt protective of her. He feels a strong connection to her. He feels so much joy when he's with her. So in the other conversations, the ladies are gushing to Gary about how they feel. But when he's with Leslie, he's gushing to her about how he feels, okay? And Leslie tells Gary that she's falling in love with him, and Gary says, you're my girl. I said, period, Gary, you better let her know. And at this point, I do feel like Gary's strongest connection is with Leslie. In the very next scene, we see Gary getting some alone time with Ellen. And Ellen tells Gary that she's falling in love with him. And then she like grabs his head for a kiss, right? And the vibe of this kiss was completely different than the vibe that we saw between Leslie and Gary. It wasn't the same. I didn't see the chemistry in this kiss at all. So usually at the end of a group date, Gary will give someone a rose. But at the end of this group date, Gary told the ladies that he just couldn't make that decision tonight, so he's gonna sleep on it and he'll give the 2 roses out tomorrow. So we see the last 2 roses go to Leslie, and to Teresa. So Susan, Sandra, and Ellen get sent home, okay? Susan and Sandra don't seem too bothered about being sent home, but we know that Ellen was gonna take it really hard, especially because she had just poured her heart out to him the night before. And although, like I said previously, I don't wanna see any of these ladies get hurt, I can tell from that kiss that Ellen was going home. But Gary, being the gentleman he is, offers to walk her outside, and he sits and he speaks to her and he's giving her like encouraging words. And Ellen is receptive, but she's like, all right, I gotta get out of here. You can tell that she was really hurt. And even in the car ride, she says that she was genuinely shocked. She did not think that she would be going home tonight. And that was the end of week 5. All right, y'all. So I got y'all all caught up. Next episode, Gary will be meeting the families. Okay. Let me know who you think he's going to pick. I think that he's going to pick Leslie. Let me know who's your favorite lady out of the 3 remaining and who was your favorite lady, period. And as usual, we'll talk about it below. Don't forget to hit like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see y'all in my next video. Bye. Roxy.